There's a scene in the film Naz and Maalik where an imam gives a brief greeting before the beginning of a prayer gathering. He says, "If you're here with the NYPD or you're with the FBI, welcome, sincerely, we expect you here." The spoken greeting is a recognition of, and perhaps a reckoning with, a seeming inevitability of police surveillance, monitoring, and criminalization of Muslim communities, by way of, for example, the so-called Countering Violent Extremism program and the New York Police Department's now disbanded demographic unit, or sometimes by an infiltrations of mosques and Muslim student groups by plainclothes cops, or through the work of FBI informants, and by the way of create and capture. One need only to look at the thousands of pages of declassified FBI files on Malcolm X, Elijah Muhammad, the Nation of Islam, and the FBI's Operation Vulgar Betrayal, as revealed in Asia Bindawi's 2018 documentary, The Feeling of Being Watched. Although declassified, these files still disclose, by way of non-disclosure memos and black and white opaque redacted box, the extent of the state's targeted actions. In the film Naz and Maalik, two black queer Muslim teenagers move in and around Brooklyn, New York, by foot, by bike, and by train, all over the course of one day. Their conversations throughout the day range from topics such as the rapid gentrification of Brooklyn, or the Quran, and bystander intervention and incarceration, and profiling at airports. At one point in the film, they're approached by a white, greasy-haired undercover cop who attempts to entrap the two into buying a gun. Unsuccessful, the undercover cop reports the teenagers to an FBI agent sitting in a black sedan. This is the making of create and capture. Create and capture is the creation of informants where, allegedly, the FBI goes to lengths to outfit its targets with terrorist starter kits in order to manufacture and then foil terrorist plots. Maalik and Naz sell various things, like Catholic saint cards, lottery tickets, and perfumed oils along Fulton Street to raise some cash. But it's their loving on each other cautiously in public that makes them illegible to the FBI, as depicted in the film. Their acts of loving on each other while moving throughout the city on the L train are cautious because of queer antagonistic surveillance by families, schools, and the public. In the film, this seeming illegibility then renders them only legible as all the more suspicious to the FBI agent in the black sedan. I want to hold on to the Maaliks and the Nazes, but not Naz and Maalik, the film, for how they allow me to think with what Sylvia Wynter calls the practice of decipherment in her essay, Rethinking Aesthetics, Notes Towards a Deciphering Practice. In this essay, Sylvia Wynter writes that a deciphering practice, quote, seeks to identify not what texts and their signifying practices can be interpreted to mean, but what they can be deciphered to do, and how. A deciphering practice is a way of getting at, as Ronaldo Walcott puts it in his discussion of the same essay, quote, a reconstituted universalism proffered from the vantage point of the subaltern and the dispossessed, end quote. Therefore, a deciphering practice moves towards making alterable our current epistemological order, rather than merely being a film or media criticism that unfolds into, as Wynter puts it, the instituting of the figure of the man. Black queer love in public makes possible an anti-colonial reading of the Maaliks and the Nazes in the time of, for example, ongoing stop and frisk, the black site for police torture that was Chicago's Haman Square, the FBI's proposed shared responsibility committees, the FBI's Don't Be a Puppet website, and the Department of Homeland Security's monitoring of the movement for Black Lives. With this frame, I now turn to first the leaked intelligence reports by the FBI on the so-called Black identity extremist, and then briefly to the documentary Whose Streets, for the guideposts that documentary offers for anti-colonial action. In this way, what follows is not strictly a comment on U.S. surveillance practices with regard to the so-called war on terror or on state and sanctioned violence against everyday Black life. Instead, by foregrounding Naz and Maalik for the sake of the Maaliks and the Nazes over the film itself and asking what can this text be deciphered to do, what I'm suggesting is that Black queer love of Black people is a liberatory practice and a strategy for confronting the gendered violences of anti-Black police terror. This claim is not revelatory, of course. For example, the writings of Kathy Cohen, the art and activist work of Tulamine, or the Black Lives Matter Toronto's list of demands and their queer positive freedom school education program for children crafted through a trans feminist lens, or the Movement for Black Lives platform statement where that we are intentional about amplifying the particular experiences of state and gendered violence that Black, queer, trans, gender nonconforming women and intersex people face. By calling attention to loving Black people as a liberatory practice, it's to say that it's a deliberate enactment of anti-colonial politics against a colonial system in all of its makings: white supremacy, capitalist exploitation, white settler logics of indigenous dispossession and bureaucratic disavowal, anti-Black terrorism, heteropatriarchal violence, etc. Decolonial transformations can be fleeting sometimes. They morph and they mutate. They can become reincorporated or structurally readjusted, so to speak, in new systems of violence. I use the term anti-colonial here intentionally, as doing so calls attention to the continuous groundwork and deliberate acts of disruption necessary to hold the world that we want to get to someday to its promise of liberation. Prepared by the FBI's Domestic Terrorism Analysis Unit and dated August 2016, the leaked intelligence assessment brought with it the creation of a new classification, the Black Identity Extremists, which the FBI defined in a rather incomplete and confounding and probably deliberate fashion as individuals who seek wholly or in part through unlawful acts of force or violence in response to perceived racism and injustice in American society, and do so in the furtherance of the establishment of a separate Black homeland or autonomous Black social institutions, communities, or governing organizations within the United States. The document cites the killing of Michael Browne in Ferguson, Missouri in August 2014, and the grand jury's non-indictment of the cop who killed him as the, quote, very likely impetus for the rise of this classification. This classification is now part of the FBI's catalog of the surveillance of Black life and the criminalization of Black political struggle. According to the leaked document, and here's a quote, the FBI assesses it's very likely that BIE's perception of unjust treatment of African Americans and the perceived unchallenged illegitimate action of law enforcement will inspire premeditated attacks against law enforcement over the next year. The leaked document continued by noting, this desire for physical or psychological separation is typically based on either religious or political belief system, which is sometimes formed around and includes a belief in the racial superiority or supremacy. The leaked document, of course, makes no reference to the quote-unquote alt-right movement or any other nomenclature that names white supremacist and white nationalist groups, organizations, and ideology, and their establishment or their calls for the establishment of a white ethno-state. I cite from the leaked document at length here to point to how it works as an FBI's power to index Black political struggle as an internal threat to national security, where this indexing becomes the state's alibi and its justification for the repression of any critique or responses coming from Black people when it comes to state violence against Black people in their communities. This leaked 12-page threat assessment is the documentary evidence of the sources and methods of the state's anti-Black surveillance. Nowhere in the threat assessment are any credible specifics around future violent acts targeted at police. Instead, it offers only the Black identity extremists as a category manufactured to trigger, or one could guess, the Bureau's counterintelligence tools, such as the recruitment of informants and other methods of discrediting and disruption. In the documentary Whose Streets, Brittany Farrell, co-founder of the St. Louis-based Millennial Activists United, calls for a different future, one that centers a Black queer critique of our current governing order. In this 2017 documentary, Farrell, along with her partner Alexis Templeton, we follow them throughout their activist work or caretaking during the Ferguson uprisings and beyond. There's a highway shutdown, their wedding, a movement work within the city, community meetings with elected officials, Ferguson October, protests, disruptive acts, and loving acts. Millennial Activists United is a grassroots organization created by Black queer women. Their ways of caring demonstrate that Black queer revolutionary love can make possible by showing what it looks like to love Black people in public spaces, like their shutdown of the I-70 highway, where one motorist violently drove through the protesters' human barricade. This love is strategic and it is dutiful. They echo Assata Shakur's words throughout the documentary. It's our duty to fight for our freedom. It's our duty to win. We must love each other and support each other. We have nothing to lose but our chains. At one point during the documentary, Brittany Farrell outlines a method for a deciphering practice, to echo Winter here, when she says, I just want to challenge the ideas of normality. If your normal is limited opportunities for people of color, why aren't you questioning that normal? If that normal is 18-year-old teenager laying in the street for 4 hours, but that's your normal, right? Everybody wants things to be normal. I feel like if you're not questioning normal, you're not paying attention. And that's the end of the quote. We can take from Brittany Farrell's quote that if you're not questioning colonial forms of domination, then you're willfully not paying attention. Although Sylvia Wynter's essay on deciphering practice is focused on texts like film that shape the imaginaries of our current governing order, we can still look to it as a means of getting at a way of reading our present in the making of our anti-colonial futures, in city spaces and elsewhere. Or, as Brittany Farrell aptly put it in Whose Streets, it's that feeling that keeps me going.